Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick. I'm Matt, that's Meredith. We are going to talk about the second half of The Punisher, season 1. We lost half our group.
I know.
They got punished.
They did. They have felt the retribution of Frank Castle.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We love you, Frank.
Yeah, you're the best. Please don't punish us.
All right, so before we get into each individual episode, how do you think of this season as a whole?
So I enjoyed it. That isn't to say it's without problems, and that isn't to say it is without, I have never been so uncomfortable watching a TV show in the last couple of years that I can think of. To be all honest, it's about the guns and the violence, and the last 4 episodes were particularly violent, and it caused me to pause. And I'm not gonna go into details because I don't think this is the time or place, but I cut my teeth on, as a stringer. I covered every brutal accident, murder you can think of in Orlando, Florida for several years of my young adult life, and seeing this play out in Punisher made some of that stuff look pale in comparison.
Yeah, this got to be, there were some moments that I'm watching and I just was a little, and I'm not that squeamish. Yeah. It just, and I know, look, like there's a lot of people who are like, it's the Punisher, what'd you expect? Like, okay, sure, but yeah, I guess part of it is the first 2/3 of this become this really solid kind of character study about a guy who's broken, and then I feel like they get towards the end of it, it's like, all right, we better deliver. And it just starts to get a little numbing.
Yeah, I feel it definitely suffered from too many episodes. You know, in previous Marvel Netflix shows, we had 2 distinct parts in the first, 6 or 7 episodes. And then like by 11 or 12, it would circle back to some of the main characters and it would all make sense. And I feel they tried to keep this thing with Billy Russo go on a little bit longer than it should. The stuff with Micro and Frank, where it was more drawn out than it needed to be. You know, they could have either done this as a 4-part miniseries, and I think we would have had a very similar satisfaction, or they could have used this as an opportunity to bring in some of the other more incredible villains that Punisher faces.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think this would have benefited from being probably 3 or 4 episodes shorter than it was, because I think it starts to stretch the narrative capabilities of sustaining a drama around a character like Frank without turning it into this torturous study that can really effectively be done a la something like Deer Hunter or the first Rambo movie, where somebody comes back and, look, there's a fair amount of crossover between a John Rambo and a Frank Castle in that come back and can't deal with life in the real world, so to speak, and for different reasons, but they're haunted by what they've done. And this one, again, like, I don't know that you want to see a Rambo TV series. I mean, look, like maybe you would, right? Any story could be done really well, but this one, it's a little like, guys, less is more with the Punisher a little bit.
And what really bothered me towards the end is that I felt we were getting a really great look and take on PTSD that soldiers suffer through. And we saw that both with Lewis's problematic storytelling and his conclusion, and more so with Frank of like, it's not just that he needs to kill people. There's something, like we knew that going into the Army, there was something broken about him. And we had an opportunity to really tackle that issue. But by the end of it, we have Micro, we have Micro's wife, we have Dina saying, oh no, just kill everyone, they deserve it. Like nobody tries to pull him back from that brink. And I feel like that's where it came apart for me, is that even the good people are now saying, our justice system is gonna fail us, you need to go take care of it. And I think they could have still had Punisher go take care of these things, like almost as if he became like a sanctioned black ops person. I don't want to get into like, rewriting territory, but I just feel they missed the mark because they were telling this really complex, deep story that needs to be told. And as a daughter and granddaughter of war veterans, I'm actually a little disappointed that they didn't push it further. I would have liked to have seen them tackle a lot of that. And I mean, ultimately, I do like where he ended up at the very end. It's still, I don't know, I think again, growing up with that, I've seen it could have been better.
Right, and that's not to say that there's, that we think this series is a failure, because I think we both agree there's a lot of good stuff going on here, not the least of which is I think Bernthal's performance is terrific.
God, yeah.
He really manages to come off as this kind of laconic, fearsome, tough guy, and that still brings some humanity to it. And we've seen other actors play this to varying degrees relatively well, but this would be easy to turn into a one-note character.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity to speak with Bernthal last year and talk to him about when he was playing Punisher in Daredevil season 2. And the amount of work that he has to put, like the headspace he has to put himself into, he says it's difficult for him to go home. And that seeing his family is like the greatest relief for it, because he put so much into playing Frank Castle. And to see that come through on screen is a testament to, one, that he is this fantastic actor, but you also have to think about the human cost that he has playing it. And he's so successful at it. And like you said, I really did thoroughly enjoy Punisher. I think it would be a perfect show if they had tightened up some things and maybe didn't let other storylines unravel. But I think what they did ultimately with Jigsaw, I loved.
Right. I'd never followed Punisher that closely. So the Billy Russo character, I hadn't really realized. And it wasn't until that final episode, I was like, oh, because I kind of wasn't reading a lot about. I know that Madani is a new character to the series, or to Marvel.
Yeah, she's made for TV.
And I, in this particular case, purposely didn't look a lot of people up because I just kind of didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's a little bit that I was maybe less interested. But the guy that played Russo, I thought that actor was really good too.
Yeah, actually almost everyone cast was really good. And I will say I like the big changes they made was Curtis, his friend, who runs the group. He's actually a villain from the get-go in the comics. Rollins actually ends up losing his eye when in the comic books where Frank is torturing him, a la like the way that Rollins and his people. So it's nice that they updated and changed some of that. Rollins ended up being not as villainous as I would have liked to have seen. Again, that was another, I feel like, a missed opportunity. He was just kind of an asshole. Like, I'm like,
exactly.
You're just a jerk.
Right. Like he's not. You want to see your villains like be creative in their villainy, or at least, to me, still to this day, one of the best villains we've gotten in any of the Marvel shows certainly is Wilson Fisk, right? Because there's a tragedy to him, and you get some of that tragedy with Mahershala Ali's Cottonmouth in Luke Cage, but. This one, he's just kind of like, oh yeah, he's a suit.
Yeah, both Wolf and Rollins are both one-note villains, and that's something that Netflix Marvel shows have taught us that they can do better. And I get when you have a character like Frank Castle that you're not exactly sure, are you a hero, are you a villain, where do you fall? But I think they could have added more depth to some of these extra characters to flesh out the story more. But again, then we have Billy Russo, who I wasn't sure. Like when they made him flip, I was like, wow, are they going to change Billy's story, and will he flip next season?
Yeah,
so I was really, I don't know, I just like that. And then he just lost it at the end. The way he just went crazy. And I know, it was a little weird for him to kind of just turn crazy, not just self-serving. But I will say the final scene with the mirror, man, that was good. That was what I wanted to see happen to him. It was brutal, but.
Yeah, that was a solid scene.
Yeah.
I liked, in the second half of the season, the episode, Front Toward Enemy, that's the Lewis kind of almost bottle episode. I didn't like that one that much.
Yeah.
I felt like that one was, it just felt like that's where the show starts to get distracted.
Well, the format was completely different from previous, episodes. The whole going back and forth.
Well, that was episode 10, right?
Okay.
And they're like leaning into Rashomon.
Oh, that's right.
Which
but,
that was cool, right?
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen that in a different
format. But yeah, the previous one, the only thing that really stood out about me for that one was there's the line, I don't know if I'm horrified or excited, Karen Page's editor says, which is like a true story for every journalist ever when one of these stories happen. But I feel like that Lewis story just got in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's moments of that could have been interesting, like, similar to where we've seen some territory get mined in Chris Nolan's Batman movies, especially in the context of a guy like the Punisher walking around. I mean, yeah, there's gonna be copycats, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of wanna see how Frank would deal with a copycat, but you don't need that much story time devoted to it, because I don't think it worked all that well.
No, and I get they were trying to set up, like, here are two soldiers who both suffer from PTSD, and here's how one can go horribly, horribly wrong against innocent people, and the other just goes against bad people. And I think that dichotomy just wasn't strong enough to sell that point home. I think there is a very important story to tell about the white male lone wolf terrorist, has become a turn of phrase nowadays. I think that is an important narrative, but I think I just don't feel that they did it as effective as it could have been, like say in the story of the Unabomber, you know?
Right.
Well, the renditions, obviously. So I feel like the Lewis stuff could have been stronger. They could have added more emphasis, and they could have given us a bit more sympathy. I think that's what he lacked, was sympathy. And you're not supposed to have sympathy for a character like that, but in Marvel Netflix shows, they do a good job, at least if not sympathy, empathy.
Right. Yeah, I think I felt a little bit of that for him, but it just felt thin, right?
Yeah.
And then there's just some weird story choices. Like I'm on the fence about Micro's wife, Sarah, and her attraction to Frank, and Frank's dealing with that. And that just, like, there's moments I'm watching that, and like, Frank, you know the guy's watching you. Like, what are you doing?
And
are you purposely messing with him?
No, but she kissed him, and I get that, and it gave Frank and Micro some more drama, but it was a storyline they could have ignored. Like, I just don't like love triangles, and I think it got in the way of what we eventually found was a really, like, honest, good friendship between Micro and Frank. I loved, like, at that end there when he's like, save my friend, he's dying. Like that, like the way it went from, like, there was one point earlier in the first part, so I'm like, yo, you guys might want to get a room, because I don't know if you guys are beating each other or where this is going, it really shows a beautiful friendship between two men and how that can grow out of even the worst of circumstances. But throwing the thing in with it, the wife was...
Yeah, that just was an odd choice. And then for the first time in those last couple episodes, we see Frank being, like, called to who he is by his dead wife.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, but that's the first time we got it, right? Like that in his head someplace is this figure that's getting him to be the family man, or is he gonna be the killer? And why are we waiting till episode 12 to see that?
Yeah, up until this point, we see snippets of Frank waking up every morning, and it's a scene that plays out with him with his wife saying, oh, the kids, blah, blah, and then she, ends up getting killed. So we kind of see this progressive, of how his unconscious mind deals with it. And then suddenly we're thrown into, when he's getting beaten to near death, he suddenly has an awkward sex scene in his mind with his wife. And then it talks about where he really belongs and what's home. And again, it came out of nowhere, and I don't quite understand why. And also, the sex scene was really awkward. In fact, most of the sex scenes were really awkward in this show.
They were, but I just watched The Room for the first time on Saturday, so...
Okay, fair point.
Yeah.
But that was...
So all sex scenes are amazing
awkward
compared to that?
That's true. I'm not against sex in films. I mean, I got to see a lot of Billy Russo, and I'm okay with that. But I just felt the equating his safe space to sex was just, it wasn't, they didn't work towards it.
I think they, for those of you watching at home, here's your chance to drink. They didn't earn the use of that.
Yes.
Is that's a match. If I say earn,
nice.
Christy says Jermaine. I say earn. So I do want to point out we had some terrific actors in here as we wrap this up. Specifically, I think for me, Amber Rose Riva as Dina Madani, who I had never really caught anything before. She was amazing. I thought she was really, really good.
Yeah, she was out of this park.
Yeah, I thought David Weber was good in a part that was somewhat underwritten as Lewis. Deborah Ann Wool as Karen Page, as always.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite Karen Page to date.
She was very good. And Ben Barnes as Billy Russo. I hadn't realized that was Ben Barnes for a while.
God, he's so dreamy. I shouldn't say that about Billy Russo. I like problematic favorites, though. Well, I know. And also, I'm gonna blank on her name, but she played Dina's mother, and she's also
Shohreh Aghdashloo.
Yes.
Oh
Anytime
my God.
she shows up, I adore her.
Yes. The voice of God.
Yes.
Sounds a lot like Shohreh Aghdashloo.
Yes.
She is amazing. And even just in tiny little bits, it's like, I love watching her. She's amazing. So where do you think this stands up for you in the canon of all of the other Netflix Marvel shows? And then I'll throw a kicker in there. The other Marvel TV shows that may or may not be within canon, such as Runaways, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
All right, well,
Agent Carter.
So I love Runaways. It's actually probably my favorite Marvel TV show to date. Then it's gonna probably go Jessica Jones. I'm still on the fence about then Daredevil season 1 and then Punisher. I think that's where. Yeah, I'm sorry. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't even register.
I'm watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just because
somebody has
to. Because somebody has to. I still haven't finished Inhumans, and I probably...
It's okay.
Right.
Have you watched Runaways?
I have not watched Runaways yet. But what's funny to me is I like to watch these super lightweight ABC shows and then imagine the viciousness that's going on in New York with the Punisher. And then, but the thing that still, and I get why they don't do it, but I'm still just fascinated by the psychology and the sociology about like, what is a guy like Punisher thinking? And we talked about this last time we talked about it. Like, what drives a guy like the Punisher to do what he does in the context of gods walking the earth, right? Oh, and the other thing I wanted to point out, like, who knew he could airbrush that well?
I know, right?
Like when he airbrushes the Skullbacker, I'm like,
skill did he learn that from? Because that was really tight. Like I thought he was going to go to like, superhero villains outfitters or us to get his suit, but that was really, and I do have to say, it was nice to see the Punisher logo costume because with the Netflix shows it's hit or miss, and it was nice. It was good. We got to see the Punisher.
Yeah, I definitely want to see something akin to somebody who talks about what that world is like. Maybe we'll finally someday get the Damage Control series. That would be amazing.
Could have done that instead of Inhumans.
Exactly.
Just saying. I think just going off that point, one of the best things we could see is just Frank honestly be like, listen, in a world of heroes, you sometimes need an anti-hero.
Yeah. So that's it for the last half of the first season of Punisher. When another Netflix show drops from Marvel, we'll be here to tell you if it's good or not. So thank you for joining us. Meredith, Matt, we'll see you next week.